I'll start with this, as I was just talking to Anat about. That is the eCTF. The Electronic Capture the Flag contest from MITRE is on, and you can sign up here if you're interested in participating. It's not entirely clear what we have, but last year they had a little hardware doodad, kind of like a Raspberry Pi, and they had some instructions where they had to write some firmware for it and try to make their firmware effective and secure, and then other teams would try to hack into the firmware. They didn't. Yeah.
So it's an embedded security.
Yeah. So it's embedded device security, and we just got a bunch of hardware, which we'll try to figure out what it is and distribute it to the right people. So if you want to participate on the team, sign up here. It's worth extra credit, I suppose, although you probably get it until next semester. I don't think much of it's going to happen until next year, but they might start doing something now. Anyway, it's a good thing to do. MITRE is a good organization. Also, on December 7, a week from this coming Saturday, is this ethical hacking workshop here, and you will be able to connect remotely, probably over my Zoom. I'll have the details here. Or you can come physically to Science 37. So those are some events coming up you might want to do. The Eloper says, who would they even sell Chrome to? That's actually a good question. I would think they might just spin off a new company to do it. Maybe they sell it to Microsoft or something. It's a good question. Even if Google sells Chrome, is Chrome still using Google search engine? Oh, I think they have been barred, and also are expected to be barred from paying to place Google search engine, which would really change their whole business model. They pay billions to force, for example, all the Apple browsers and others and Firefox to use the Google search engine. So if they're not supposed to do that anymore, that would actually lower the significance of Google search engine. I'm pretty much using it because they don't index my page anymore. I have to use Bing to find my pages these days. So anyway, so let's move on. Today we got this we're up to Chapter 7, Security Operations. So administrative security. These are management making rules to control people. Here's some standard ones. Least privilege, where people don't have more permissions than they need to do their job, like you don't make everybody the administrator. Need to know, where they do not know things that are not relevant to their job. And separation of duties. So multiple people have to approve critical transactions. This was the way it was at my financial business I worked at. If you wanted to distribute money, one person would prepare it and another person had to verify it was right before you send money out. You also move people from one job to another so that if people are committing fraud and hiding the evidence, the new person who takes over their job will presumably discover that. The same thing with forced vacations, non-disclosure agreements we've talked about. Still legal everywhere, very, very common. You have to keep secrets, and you should be doing background checks of your employees. At the very least, you should verify that what they say in their resumes is true. I've heard statistics that 75% of resumes now contain lies, so obviously most people are not verifying the information in the resumes. And a lot of high posts have people that have fake degrees and get caught and such. You have to watch what the high privileged people are doing. Otherwise, you have no control over them. So watch what they're doing, creating more accounts and so on. That's the only way to find out if your high privileged administrative users are doing bad things. And there's forensics, where the first issue is to preserve the evidence, collect evidence, and so it won't change. And then you may have anti-forensics. There are various ways to put files on machines that will confuse anti-forensic software. Also, these days you have to capture RAM. It's not enough to capture just the hard drive. Most of the evidence you need is probably in RAM for a modern infection. And so you identify the evidence, you acquire it, then you analyze the evidence and make a report of what you found. So live capture is the most common technique. This is easier and faster. It is not complete capture of all the evidence, but it is much more likely to produce the evidence you need without a lot of extra junk. So taking an image of the whole hard drive is usually too much evidence. That takes you a week to sift through all that stuff. And for most forensic tasks, like incident response, like find out if this machine is infected, and if so, at what, that's an overkill. But you might need to do it for a serious case, where you're trying to reconstruct everything someone did. So you make a binary image of the entire hard drive, including the unused sectors, so that includes the deleted files. For a magnetic hard drive, not so much for SSDs. They usually don't have deleted files you can recover. So allocated space is the normal files that are in use, and therefore they have a file name and an owner and a creation date. Unallocated space is leftover space that may contain deleted files. Slack space contains a few bytes at the end of clusters, typically too small to be of any use. And bad blocks may contain clusters that were determined to have a read error, so there'd be some data left in them. Usually you don't find much of anything here. The main thing you find is allocated space and maybe something in the unallocated space. So you back these things up with Norton Ghost, FTK Imager, or Encase, or many other tools, or just the Unix utility DD will make a complete backup of a drive, including the unused sectors. Then there's network forensics, where you look in the network traffic to find suspicious things in network traffic. You can reconstruct anything that goes over the network from network traffic if you can get through whatever encryption is on it, which is now almost everywhere and makes network capturing much less useful. You usually don't have the ability to break into the encryption for modern secured connections, although corporations all break encryption at some point with basically a man-in-the-middle attack, just so they can analyze traffic and see what's going on and off their network. So you have to have a binary file to analyze if you find like malware, and then there's reverse engineering, which we'll have a whole course in it next semester, malware analysis. Using disassemblers, debuggers, and virtual machines are the tools you use to analyze malware and see what it does. And then we were just talking about embedded device. The embedded device captured flag. You have solid-state drives in these little devices like cell phones and smart doorbells and all the others, and they have firmware in them. And you can take them apart and see how they work, and they have data stored of various kinds. E-discovery is producing the evidence for a lawsuit, which is very close to forensics, and you have to hunt through a whole bunch of data and find the data relevant to a lawsuit, usually by something like a keyword match. And incident response, you have these steps. You prepare your team, you detect that something bad is happening, then you respond to it to contain the harm, so the fire quits spreading, then you mitigate it, then you report, recover, so you get back to normal operations, remediation, and then you have some kind of fix of the flaws so the bad guys can't get in. And we've summarized this. All right. There are checklists to guide you through it, and detection involves log files, network traffic, intrusion detection systems, and so on. The response is first to stop the problem from getting worse and identify what systems are included in the problem, and then mitigation is you have to determine the cause of the incident, clean the systems. You have to figure out what the root cause is, which is difficult, and then you have a mitigation event where you kick out the bad guys and keep them out, and then you have reporting, keeping track of what you've been doing, mainly for your technical team. Yeah, that's steam heat. We have steam heat circa 1910, which has this property. The pipes are expanding and contracting. It sounds like somebody's pounding on them with a hammer. Yeah. Anyway, so you have technical reporting for your team full of exactly what you did, what tools you used, so you can compare it to future incidents, and non-technical reporting to your non-technical stakeholders. And especially, this is the thing about CISSP, this course is to understand how important it is to communicate with non-technical management. So recovery is getting things back to normal operation. You have to monitor things because very often the attacker will return because you did not really succeed in patching all the holes or finding all the malware. That is very common, so they come back, just like a disease that comes back. Then you have, that's remediation, where you try to block the way they got in. And then you have lessons learned. Very important to keep your team constantly improving. You have to have a post-mortem where you decide, okay, what happened? How did we detect it? How did we respond? How can we do better next time? A very important activity. And a big part of it is root cause analysis. If you never find out exactly how they got in, then you're very unlikely to be able to stop them from coming back, or somebody else using the same vulnerability to go in. So let's try the first Kahoot here. And, all right. Yeah. When I record a professional podcast, they get pretty mad about that noise. But there's nothing to be done. surprising thing to me is the pipes never finished doing that, stop doing it. It's always the same. Seems like they would move to wherever they're trying to move to. That's not the right direction. All right. All right. All right. So which one gathers evidence for a lawsuit? I think we did this 2 weeks ago, but anyway, the review is not bad. That's e-discovery. They call it a discovery order from a judge saying you have to cough up all the evidence related to this topic. All right, which control is also called That's need to know. That's why they have SCIFs, sensitive compartmented information facilities, things that only cover one topic. Like if you're working on Russia, you're cleared to know stuff about Russia, but not stuff about China. Which control requires your personnel to keep secrets. That's a non-disclosure agreement. Same thing lawyers and doctors have to do. All these people learn things that are not public knowledge, and they are required to keep them secret. All right, which one includes writing IR policies? That's how you prepare for instant response, having policies, assigning roles to people and such. All right, which one has to include a non-technical explanation? Of course, that's your final report. All right. And which one includes submitting a final report to management? Now that's part of the postmortem. Your final report comes at the end, includes not only what you did, but also your plans for improvement. All right. All right, so preventive detective controls. These are things that detect problems coming in and may prevent them or may just detect them. So your intrusion detection system will detect malicious actions on the network. A prevention system will do something like turn on a firewall rule to block malicious actions. It can be a network-based forensic system, looks only at the network traffic and can protect a whole network. A host-based one protects only one host and therefore has access to more information, like the logs on that host. So you might have both of these, just like you typically have both of these firewalls in both these positions. So you'll have a NIDS up here analyzing the network traffic to protect the entire network, or you can have one inside a NIPS in here which is going to protect your trusted network from malicious traffic. One problem is the prevention system can be tricked. You can then just flood it with bad traffic to cause it to deny access to the internet and create a denial of service condition. That's one of the many risks about having intrusion prevention. So one IDS, the simplest kind, just has static signatures that looks for certain patterns in the traffic. Others look for protocol errors, and other ones just look for anything unusual, anomaly detection. The problem, this one can respond to new attacks, but it also can trigger on innocent traffic. SIEM systems correlate a bunch of data. Splunk is the leader in this field, so it has a bunch of data like network traffic and logs and IDS systems all feeding into it. Now there's also something called continuous monitoring, which is replacing the old system of certification and accreditation, where you look at a system once every 3 years. Now they try to continuously monitor to make sure your system is compliant to your security policy. Data loss prevention is a good idea, where you watch the exiting data and see if sensitive data is leaving your network. A relatively new thing. Companies didn't used to bother doing this much. And then there's endpoint security. Originally it was just antivirus. Now it includes a lot more, like allow listing, controls for removable devices like USB thumb drives and so on, disk encryption and so on. A security suite with a bunch of security measures for the endpoint devices under control of the management. So antivirus mostly depends on signature detection, so that's deny listing. Application allow listing is the new way to do this, which is nice, where you only allow known good software to run. The problem is you have to keep updating your signatures with every update, and people can't install anything without approval of management first. This is the way a lot of my consulting gigs are. They're using a cloud machine on Azure, and it can only put in software from their company store with the approved software. You cannot download anything and install it, so that's one way to go. It's of course much safer, but it's more limited. So you disable auto run, which is default on all modern operating systems, so nothing runs when you plug in a USB stick. That's been pretty much turned off since Windows XP Service Pack 3. Full disk encryption is usually what you want. Encrypting just certain files in folders is not safe because when you open them, it makes temporary files while they're decrypted, and those are often not included. So that's why it's recommended to just encrypt the whole hard drive. And that's the default on most modern operating systems. So honeypots are where you put up a fake system just to attract attackers. Not very many people bother doing this. Honeynets, where you simulate a whole network of honeypots. The main people that do this are people who are running antivirus companies and they want malware samples. The only thing I hear that a normal company might use is Think's canaries, which are honeypots designed to tell you when someone is attacking you. And those have a good reputation. They're rather expensive, a few $1,000s a year, but they do apparently make you a lot safer in that they attract the attacker attacks them first. You are notified somebody's attacking you, and you can do something about it, hopefully before they get to the real goodies. And then there's asset management. You have to control your stuff. Configuration management is common, so you have configurations for your laptops, your firewalls and everything, your routers. You have some kind of standards configuration, and you have baselining, which captures your security configuration at a moment in time. You have patch management. This is really important. You have to deploy patches, but you have to test them first because Microsoft keeps on making bad patches. Again, last month there were patches that would make your machine not boot up. There are patches that would break certain software. It's unfortunate, so you really have to test them first. And there's vulnerability management, where you try to detect vulnerabilities, typically by running something like a vulnerability scanner on some regular basis. The problem, of course, is there are zero-day vulnerabilities and zero-day exploits, which you cannot detect and you cannot patch. All you can do is have layers of defenses and hope that some later defense will catch the attack. And then there's change management that just monitors any network changes and gets approval from a board, so people can't just arbitrarily be putting up new routers and network segments and so on. They have to evaluate these and decide if they create a new risk and if it's worth it. So you identify a change you want, you propose it, then you submit it to a change management board that assesses the risk. If they approve it, then you test the change, notify impacted parties, implement it, and find out if it actually messed something up. Unfortunately, it often does mess something up, and you have to roll back or change your procedures or make some other correction to the people who can no longer do their job because of whatever you changed. This is extremely common. I remember I worked at a primitive company before this stuff was well defined, and the IT department would come in and make a change that they thought was okay, and we would come in and nothing worked because they didn't really test the apps we used. They would just ping the network end and they'd say, there, the network's working fine. We'd come in and our apps didn't work. We were not happy. Anyway, we got 7B. All right. That change management stuff is often how amateur security people say, oh, just use the latest version of PHP, the latest version of software. They're like, dude, that is not as easy as you think it is. You upgrade to that and then everything's broken. We got a lot of work, you know. All right, what defense prevents PII from leaving the network? Personally identifiable information. Data loss prevention. That's what watches the traffic going off your network to see if it is stuff that shouldn't be leaving. And I see a comment saying, I wait for the first hot fix to come out. Yeah, me too. Wait for Service Pack 1 before you go on. Even that doesn't make you completely safe, but it's a lot better than just jumping on the new thing, which usually is all buggy. All right, what defense correlates data from many sources? SIM systems like Splunk, that is the whole point of them. One database you can query to connect all the logs and other information to track down what's happening. All right, what system blocks all unrecognized software? Called whitelisting. The modern term is allow listing, but that's the idea. You only allow known good things to come in instead of trying to identify all the badness. You just identify all the goodness, which would seem easier and more effective. It's just hard to maintain. All right, what defense compares traffic to a baseline of normal activity? That's anomaly detection. This is very difficult because network traffic is not steady and constant. It has all sorts of weird spikes and strange things going through, even when nothing's wrong. It's mighty hard to determine what's an anomaly. All right, so continuity of operations means you have the company continue to survive after a disaster. Service level agreements are one issue. Determine exactly what your vendors have promised you, like a percentage of uptime or something. Fault tolerance is fault-tolerant devices and systems are ones that can tolerate a fault without having a failure. If something breaks, that's a fault, but if users no longer receive service, that's a failure. So if you have backups or a cluster of devices so one can take over, you can have a fault without experiencing a failure. Backup is real important so that if all your systems go down, say your building burns down, you have some way to recover. The simplest is a full backup of all your data. You can also have incremental backups or differential backups that copy only the data changed since a certain time. If you have so much data and your backup system is so slow that you can't back up everything in one night. So you back up everything on the weekend, and on the Monday through Friday you back up just the parts of the data that have changed. So you might have to play 2 or more tapes to reconstruct a previous condition. Then there's RAID, which is a redundant array of disks. This is not the same as a backup. This is an availability solution. It's not a backup because if your building burns down, all your RAID goes down and you don't have a copy. What it is, though, is fault tolerance. Now RAID 0 is a striped set, which has extra copies, which just smears the data across many platters to make it faster to read and write, but it doesn't protect it in case the platters fail. All the rest of them are redundant. Mirrored set has 2 identical copies of the data on 2 drives, so if one fails, you have another copy right there, and the others use striping, where extra copies of data are distributed across the disks, the most common being RAID 5. All right, and so parity saves XORed data from other drives, so if you have RAID 5, you can arrange it so that a certain number of drives can fail and you can still reconstruct the data from the evidence on the other drives. All right. You can also have a striped set of mirrors. If it's fault tolerant, this way it's faster and fault tolerant. You can have big arrays with many, many disks in them, and a lot of people do. All right, you can also have redundant power supplies, network cards, disk controllers, servers, your high availability clusters. One way is to have active passive, where one is just sitting there, not being used until the other one fails, so there's a heartbeat signal coming from one, and when the heartbeat stops, the other one takes over. That's one way to do it. That's active passive. Active active is where all of them are being used all the time, so your customers get faster service when all the servers and drives are running. When one of them breaks, they continue to get service, but it's slower, because one device is having to carry more of the load. Then there's business continuity planning and disaster recovery planning. Business continuity planning makes sure that your business will continue to operate in case of a disaster. So you have plans for how you're going to do your critical services in case of like a fire or an earthquake or a pandemic or something that means your normal business cannot run in an unusual location. So you have plans. The disaster recovery plan is one of the plans in the business continuity plan. This is short-term to deal with a specific disruption, like a malware infection. So out here you've got the business continuity plan is this whole thing. Then you have a bunch of related plans inside here: continuity of operations, incident response plan, continuity of support, disaster recovery plan, business recovery plan, crisis communications, occupant emergency to protect your people. Those are all various things that contribute to your business continuity plan. So you have to determine how long you can tolerate, you run your business without something, so you can afford to wait for that part of the stuff to be restored. So you might sort them by cause, human causes like terrorism or insiders or phishing or something, or environmental causes. These are all various types of disasters that might happen. So things like earthquakes, a strike, like equipment failure, and so on. Many things can happen, and you should have plans for these things. Errors and omissions is the most common source. It is more common that your own staff will make a mistake and cause trouble than that some outside attacker will come in. It's usually just your people making mistakes. And so if you have good controls, hopefully you can avoid these by noticing when people do bad things. All right. If you don't have temperature and humidity controlled, then your electrical components will fail more often. You have to test your backup power. You have UPS systems for temporary power while you have time to start your generator or shut down your systems. Disasters like warfare and terrorism and so on are the things that can happen to you. Personnel shortage, strikes, an individual worker might be critical, and then loss of them would be a disaster. That's why no one person should be irreplaceable in your company. There's something I think Abraham Lincoln said, every graveyard is full of irreplaceable men. Anyway, and you have communications failures. If your telephone network goes down, what are you going to do? And that happens. And so the disaster recovery process, you respond to it, you activate your team, you communicate with them, they go in and assess the damage and decide what you can do. Is it safe to go back in that building, that kind of thing, and then you reconstitute things. So you may initially assess the damage and decide, is the event a disaster, and how big is the disaster, what do we have to do? Then you activate your team, which might be difficult if you have something like a hurricane and the telephone networks are down. That's why sometimes people use things like ham radio to communicate with people in disasters. And then you perform a thorough assessment to determine the damage, to consider the maximum tolerable downtime, and protect the safety of your personnel, and figure out how to resume business. Recover your critical business processes, either at the primary site or going to some secondary site because you decide the primary site is not usable, and then you begin a salvage team trying to recover what you can from the primary site. All right. So let's try another Kahoot. We got to tour Pacific Bell's disaster recovery team a few years ago. They have a series of trailers that have all the equipment they need, all place for people to sleep, all the food and water, and power generators, and they can drive like about 6 of these trucks into an empty lot, and within a couple of hours have a cell phone tower there right in the middle of a hurricane. So it's really important because a lot of people need to use the telephone network to get help. And that stuff was so expensive they would have armed guards driving in front and back of it to stop people from hijacking the trucks. So. Not sure I know the joke with the chocolate starfish. I know chocolate fish is a New Zealand thing. All right. All right, so which disk array lacks fault tolerance? That grade 0. The striping, it makes it faster but does not survive failure of a disk platter. All right, what's the most common source of disruption? Your own staff making mistakes. All right, what kind of server cluster uses all the servers all the time? That's load balancing. You give each server some of the work so they're all working together. All right, What plan deals with a specific disruption like fire? That's the disaster recovery plan, tied to a specific disaster. All right. Chocolate starfish, won't be telling who they are if they don't get points. Anyway. All right, so developing your business continuity plan or disaster recovery plan, you initiate it, you decide what part of the company it will protect. That's the scope. Then you determine, and I go through these, so that's, yeah, determine your, so here's initiation. You develop a contingency planning, how you're going to deal with things that are down, business impact analysis to decide how critical your systems is, which is how much would it really hurt us if this thing was not up. Then you have preventive controls to prevent it from going down, recovery strategies if it does goes down, and a contingency plan for IT, perhaps moving your IT operations to a different location or a different network for a while. Then you have to test your plan, train your people, and have exercises where they practice working with it. And then you have to keep maintaining and updating the plan as the situation changes, your network changes, your personnel change, and so on. So there's a spreadsheet here where you go through these things, develop the statement, conduct the business impact analysis, identify the controls, and so on. Just a diagram here with a little more detail about it. You need management to support the plan. It's going to require company resources to develop the plan and to maintain it, so you can't do it without management support, which is true of almost everything. So you have to have a point of contact, your project manager, to make sure it's being done correctly. They have to have good organizational skills, credibility, and authority. The manager does not have to have in-depth technical skills. Other people on their team can have the technical skills. Their main job is to make sure that management is supporting it and allocating enough resources. So you build your team, you establish a continuity planning team, and you got to have stakeholders from all the parts of your company so they can point out how their part of the business would be affected by your disaster, like public relations, line managers, human resources, and so on. This is what I was mentioning went wrong at my company. The IT department would make a plan, do something without talking to the rest of us and making sure that they were not in fact messing us up, which they often did. You decide what assets are protected and what events are considered. That's the scope. Then you assess the critical state, find out how important it is, how much do you need these assets, what would be affected if they were unavailable. Your business impact analysis determines how long could you tolerate having this part of it go down. And then here's an example. If your server room is not locked, that's a vulnerability. And here's the impact analysis, and here's the mitigation. Install locks. Your software is out of date. That could create the loss of data from a cyber attack. If you have no firewall, that's again a risk which you could fix by moving it to managed hosting that would have a firewall on it. That's an option. That's a risk transfer solution where you move it to somebody else. So you determine how long you can put up without stuff. The recovery point objective is the amount of data loss you can withstand. If you back up every night, then if your systems collapse during the day, you're going to have to redo up to 1 day of work. So you're never going to get some data you didn't back up. Your time objective is the time it takes to recover the systems, and your work recovery time is the time required to configure a recovered system. So the maximum tolerable downtime is the sum of those two, how long it'll take to recover systems and how long it'll take to restore the configuration of the recovered system and make it really ready to go. So the mean time between failures is an estimate, often a very rough estimate, of how often you expect stuff to fail. Mean time to repair is another useful measurement. And you have your minimal operating requirements when you're considering what environment to set up new servers in and things like that. Your supply chain management. People are more and more concerned about supply chain security these days. There have been so many really serious supply chain events, supply chain incidents like solar winds. And telecommunications, of course, you should have some alternative ways to reach through to people like satellite phones. This is one of the selling features of the new iPhone. I think it has an emergency call to a satellite, which supposedly will work even when the normal phone network is down, which could be pretty important. Then you got to address all your utilities. Any of these things can fail, your water, your power, and so on. You need to have a plan for what happens if they fail. And you have a recovery strategy. So the cheapest is to have no plan at all, and then if you have a disaster, you're just dead in the water. You can have a cold site, which means you have a location which has power and you have access to the room, but you haven't even got anything set up. A warm site has stuff ready to go, but you need to load up your data. Hot site is recovered even faster, and a redundant site is where you have an alternate site that is constantly kept update with everything, so you can just fail over to it immediately. So the main difference is the cost and how slow it is. So redundant site, it's ready to go immediately, everything is already there. The hot site might take an hour to get ready. The warm site might take a few days. The cold site may take weeks to bring up. And of course, it's much cheaper, so the question is, for example, City College doesn't really need our website. If it went down for, say, a whole week, it wouldn't really stop classes. So we could probably get away with a cold site, whereas somebody like Google needs redundant sites. They can't put up with even a few minutes of outage. That would be intolerable. They have sites ready to go all the time. All right, you can have a reciprocal agreement where you use somebody else's data center, a partner company. You can have a mobile site on wheels like I was talking about the telecommunication has. You can subscribe to services to outsource some of this. And so there's a lot of opportunities. So here's a lot of the plans: the business continuity plan, business recovery plan, continuity of operations, continuity of support, crisis communications, incident response and disaster recovery, and occupant emergency to protect the safety of your employees. Various plans, you need them all. So continuity of operations may move your personnel to an alternate site. After that, you'll have business recovery when everything is fixed and you can move back to your original site. You'll have continuity of support for your IT and your incident response plan to things like viruses and worms. Your occupant emergency plan covers the safety of your people, and your crisis management plan will coordinate your managers so you know who's in charge. And so that'll include your crisis communications plan, call trees, emergency operations center, vital records stored somewhere off-site, and executive successive planning. What do you do if a decision has to be made and the executive is unavailable? Who is qualified to take over for them? All right, let's take a look at another Kahoot. All right. For the electronic embedded capture the flag contest. All right, so which value measures the maximum time needed to recover systems? That's the mean time to recover. That's what that is. All right.
How come
Yeah?
So it checked off RTA.
Yeah, recovery point objective is how much data you get back. Recovery time objective is part of this, but not the whole thing. Let's go back to it.
So, yeah, I'm just wondering between mean time to recover and.
Yeah, it
RTA.
gets one of those confusing ones. All right. There. The RTO is the time to recover, but then you got the time to reconfigure it. So you get the maximum tolerable downtime.
Well,
That's
that
the-
wasn't one of the options, actually.
What's that?
That wasn't one of the options.
Oh, okay. Well,
It was
let's see.
on the,
Oh, mean time to recover. Let's find what that is. Mean time to repair. You're right, actually. That's not good. Oh, it is RTO. I see. I'm confused. The right answer is, in fact, RTO, which is good. Recovery time objective. Recovery point objective is how much data you get back. Recovery time objective is the time it takes to restore the system. So this is the right answer. I'm surprised a lot of people say MTTR. That's the mean time to repair, which is not the same thing. That's like a promise from the vendor.
oh, okay.
Yeah. It's good. Yeah, it's not a bad answer, though. Yep. I say, that's part of why these things are extra credit. You can argue about them. And man, wait till you see the real CISSP exam. It is full of stuff like this. It's full of stuff that will just make you cry. You really need to practice on a sample
So
test.
is the MTTR is not like a hard figure, whereas the RTO is?
Well, it's the mean time to repair, like the mean time between failures. It's really just an estimate. This one here is an objective. So you might not achieve it, but it's defined. That's your standards. I'm supposed to have it fixed by this time. Yeah. Good. All right. All right, so which recovery option takes an hour to implement? That's called the hot site. That's pretty good. Which one uses another organization's systems? That's a reciprocal agreement. All right. And which one protects human life? The occupant emergency plan. Like how do you get the people out of there if, say, the elevators aren't working and such? Fair enough. All right, I think we can do one more, and that'll be the end of this. All right, so backups and availability. A continuous availability would have, your maximum tolerable downtime is getting shorter, and some people want continuous availability, so you have maximum tolerable downtime of 0, so you have to have redundant systems online all the time. Like I'm saying, this is what Google and internet companies typically have. You can also have paper records. Sometimes that's your best answer. You can have full backups of all the data, or incremental and differential, like I said, that gives you just the data that has changed since a previous backup. You can rotate your tapes, first in, first out. You have 14 days of backups just rotating. More commonly you do this is certainly what we did at my financial company. You had changed tapes, you changed every day, but every Monday was a weekly tape, and you have 4 of them for the month, and then the first tape of every month you would keep forever. So you could reconstruct times far in the past. That's the idea. Then you have electronic vaulting. This is increasingly popular, where you make your backups over the internet, so you don't have to handle the tapes and get some safe place to put them. You can do remote journaling of a database, and you can have database shadowing, where you just have 2 identical databases on 2 servers for faster recovery. High availability options, active, or you have duplicate systems, both running up to date all the time, or active-passive, where the backup only comes up when the main device goes down. And then, what happens if the company that wrote your software goes out of business? Sometimes they take the source code and put it at a trusted third party, so you'll be able to get the source code if that company goes out of business. There's also a law that said any company that goes out of business, you're allowed to reverse engineer their stuff to fix it. This is a big problem. You depend on stuff, then the company vanishes. Now what are you going to do? So you got to test and your plan. You have to read. You can just read through the plan to see if it looks good. The review. Then you can have a read through where you list all the components, and you can have a tabletop exercise where you talk through the steps and everyone talks about what they're going to do. So you make sure everybody understands their role. You can have a simulation test where they actually carry out the process. You can have parallel processing where you duplicate business transactions on backup systems, and then for the most severe test, you interrupt business. This is what Cloudflare does. The CEO will go and just pull out a plug to disconnect one of their data centers and to prove that the others take over operation immediately, and you have no interruption. That's the best, but of course, if it fails, you cause a disaster, which wasn't going to happen otherwise. And that's why I know Netflix has the Chaos Monkey, which runs and automatically breaks things all the time, randomly breaks things, so everybody just has to get used to always thinking about redundancy. It turns off servers, it breaks network connections, just at random all the time to keep everybody on their toes.
Netflix?
Yeah, Netflix.
Why did they do that for the fight, the Mike Tyson did?
I don't know. That's a good question. Yeah, now it's been going down. It does sound like they didn't do it enough, huh? They used to be very good. Like 5 years ago, the Netflix engineer visited and gave a talk, and I said, "You want to hire our students?" He said, "No, we never hire anybody straight out of any college because no college teaches them enough. We don't touch anybody until they have real years of experience at another company." They were very proud of being super secure and well organized. Sounds like maybe they've slipped a bit. So then you got to train your stuff. How do you start your power? How do you contact your people? And of course, awareness. So all your employees know what to do. If there's a disaster, who do they contact to find out whether they should go to work and things like that. So then you have to maintain your plan. You have to consider your change management. Every time you're changing your network, changing your systems, you have to make sure that you also change your disaster recovery plan to meet the new requirements. The common mistakes are you don't have enough support from management, people don't take it seriously enough, you have the wrong scope, or you don't consider your supply chain enough, you don't test it or keep it up to date. These are common mistakes. So there are some frameworks for this. NIST has one for U.S. government systems. There's an international one, a British one, and another international one. There are various ones out there, standards you can meet. Standards are, of course, good because then you can easily communicate to someone, we make it up to this standard, therefore you know what we've got, and therefore you know how it will affect your compliance if you trust us with part of your system. And there's a Business Continuity Institute with various defined practices here, like there all are. These frameworks help you define what you're doing and communicate to your partners and customers exactly what you're doing. All right. That's what I thought. I thought the chocolate starfish would be coming. All right, so which one has MTD of 0? That's continuous availability. You pay for 2 whole systems, so, or more, so that you'll have no downtime at all when one fails. All right, what system saves 2 identical copies of a database? They call it database shadowing. All right. Let me just go back because I'm not quite sure what remote journaling is. There. Remote journaling is what does occasional checkpoints, but not continuously. Okay, good. All right.
Question, so MDT of 0, which system has it?
What's that?
Which system has the MDT of 0?
Continuous availability.
Okay.
So there's no downtime when one fails. All right? All right, so which test is the most dangerous? Obviously, complete business interruption. You actually turn off the systems you need during business because you are so confident that the other system will take over. Yeah, which one is not a common error? Yeah, excessive testing. It's usually the opposite, not enough testing. All right. Right. All right. So I'm going to stop this one.